Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lauren Tostenson. I am the Public Information Officer for El Paso County Planning and Community Development, who is our host department for today's presentation. And we are also very excited to have members of the Pikes Peak Regional Building and Regional Building Department here with us. We have a great presentation for you. We're going to go over all of our residential site plans and other permits. Lots of good information for even anyone from homeowners to contractors, anybody really looking to get permits submitted through either of our departments. And we hope you'll find the presentation informative. That's the plan. Just so you guys know, there will be a portion of the presentation for questions. We kind of want that to be a big bulk of what you guys get today, is that interactive piece with the experts, for lack of a better term. And so we, if you look at the top right-hand side of your screen, you should see a Q&A, and that's where you can submit your questions throughout the presentation. So go ahead and locate that. If you have anything that kind of pops into your head during the presentation, just go ahead and type it into the Q&A chat feature, and we will get to that at the end. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our Executive Director of Planning and Community Development, Craig Dawsey, who's going to start us off with today's presentation. So let me just get our PowerPoint ready to go here. And Craig, you are up.
Okay, well, thank you, Lauren. Welcome, everybody. This is another installment of our EPC Engage series. We've touched on a number of different topics, trying to kind of target some of the technical aspects of what we do and kind of make it a little bit more consumable for the users of our process and our regulations. So this is our next installment, and that's really talking, as Lauren said, about the things at the front counter. We'll get into who our presenters are here in just a second, but we also wanted to make sure that you're all aware that we have some additional events coming up. In September, our next EPC Engage event will cover the do's and don'ts of concrete work. That'll really focus a lot on both the engineering side and the inspection side, and trying to provide a little bit more upfront notice of what the expectations are, testing requirements, those types of things with regard to concrete. And then in November, our EPC Engage event will feature sort of what we're calling the Realtor's Guide to Planning and Zoning. And a lot of calls that we get are from realtors asking questions about certain areas of the county, different zoning constructions, those types of things. We want to make sure that that's something that we can address, maybe in more ongoing fashion, and provide the tools needed for realtors to do their job even more efficiently than they already do. So. Look for those two upcoming events. We can go to the next slide, Lauren. So for today's event, covering the things that we deal with at our front counter, starting with site plans and other associated type application types, we have Pietra from our office, who handles a large number of what comes in at our front counter. But we're also happy to welcome Jane and Greg from Regional Building. As most of you know who have gone through the process, we're sort of tied at the hip with Regional Building. We share an atrium, we share a building with them, and that creates a lot of efficiencies, but we're hoping that this presentation will kind of highlight some of those additional efficiencies by laying out a more streamlined process for everybody, so there's a little bit better understanding of sort of the county's role versus Regional Building's role. So with that, if we move to the next slide, Lauren. As I said, some of the things we're going to be covering include residential site plan reviews, home occupations, temporary uses. Those are kind of an ever-changing thing as new uses come about. Focusing on things like kennels. Again, a lot of the things that are kind of low level when it comes to land use review, but certainly are very important to a lot of folks and are important to us. And then touching on things like agricultural exemptions and things like accessory structures, and kind of how those processes work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pietra to start covering residential site plan reviews. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Craig. Next slide, please. All right, so El Paso County Planning and Community Development approves land use items within the unincorporated county. The difference between our department and the building department is that we approve the location of structures and the building department reviews the structural plans. Jane and Greg with the building department will go over the beginning process of submission into their system. The sequencing of our reviews and inspections is the site plan and BESQCP are uploaded into the E-plan. A form is filled out for the client by the client for the driveway application. The E-plan is then triaged by enumerations and is distributed to applicable agencies. The plan will then drop into a queue for planning review. It will be assigned to a reviewer and an inspector. And then the reviewer will process the BESQCP and site plan while the inspector does the inspection of the driveway. And with that, I'm going to pass this on to Greg and Jane for their portion.
Thank you very much. Hope you guys can hear us okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks to the county for kind of organizing this and bringing us in to kind of join forces for this really important webinar today. But I think Petra put it together pretty well, the differences between the county and us. Whenever we kind of explain it, we kind of say the county zoning kind of decides what and where you can build, and then when you guys get ready to actually go to build, that's when you kind of come across the hall over to us at Regional Building. So one of the first things that you'll run into is submitting those plans. I'll kind of turn it over to my colleague Jane, who's right next to me. She'll kind of go through a lot of the RBD slides, starting with a number of projects that require plans here in the Pikes Peak region.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so the slide that's in front of you right now shows what projects require plan review. For the most part, all commercial projects, excluding like-for-like replacements, require a plan submittal and approval. And if they are in the county, then that would also include a review by the county zoning and planning department. Residential plans is on the right-hand side. You'll see the types of projects that require permits that require plan review in our jurisdiction. New homes, obviously, additions, interior remodels, basement finishes, decks, pergolas, sheds, etc. Foundation repairs, any structural or framing modifications, and PV solar. And this is not a complete list. We do have a complete list of permittable items and plans that permits that require plans on our website. And we can give you that link later.
One thing to keep in mind, not everything does require a plan. We have a few examples on the left: furnaces, water heaters, re-roofs. Those are examples of things that need permits, but they don't necessarily need a plan.
And anything that requires a change to the footprint of the property is also going to need to be reviewed by the county zoning department, as well as Pikes Peak Regional Building Department, along with possibly some other external agencies, and we'll go into that in a little bit. Could we get the next slide, please?
Yes, ma'am.
So we have 3 ways for plans to be submitted. And obviously during COVID, that wasn't the case. We were only able to have plans submitted through our portal. But now we're sort of back to normal. You can still submit plans electronically. That is always going to be the fastest, most efficient way for you to get your plans approved. If they are a small scope project, you can walk them through our permit counter. If you have an appointment with our plan review department, and that appointment can be booked right on the main page of our website. And then if it's a paper plan that's too big to walk through, we require you to check it in, and we will route it to the applicable agencies for their reviews. If those agencies are not in our building, then it's the responsibility of the submitter to chase down those external reviews. But as Craig said, we're in the same building as county zoning, so you should be able to see the both of us if you require both of our sign-offs. Electronic plan review is done through our ePlan portal on our website, and we do have a video on there that shows how that takes place. In order to do this, you have to either have a contractor account or you have to set up what we call an other account if you're an architect or a designer, a developer, and you're the one submitting plans. That's done through the ePlan portal on our website. An ePlan number is assigned once the plans have gone through our triage process. And that triage process makes sure that all the documents that are required are included in the submittal and labeled correctly. And Greg would back me up here by saying that most of the plans that we get that are kicked back are because they are incomplete, not because they're wrong. So it's important to make sure that you have all the correct documents ahead of time and make sure that you're uploading them and labeling them correctly. Once they've made it through the triage process, a plan check number is assigned and a plan check fee will then be requested for payment. Once that plan check fee is paid, plans will go into review. So the great thing about submitting plans electronically is that Petra can review at the same time as our construction reviewers are looking at them. You don't have to wait for one department to be finished for the next department to see it. Anybody can see those plans once they have gone into review.
Yeah, that's really important. I think for our community, it's really a big benefit, I think, to all the agencies involved. Under the old system, old school, where you actually have like a big giant plan, paper plan that you would bring in, what would have to happen is we would have to review it, and then when we were done with it, then we would physically walk that paper plan down the hall or upstairs to the different agencies, whereas doing it electronically allows all the agencies to do it simultaneously. So that's really why we encourage everyone to go that electronic route. It's an efficiency thing. We want all the agencies to be able to review it at the same time and save you as a homeowner or a builder, save you a lot of time.
And one thing that we have in place now that we're back open to the public by appointment, if your plan qualifies for a walkthrough, meaning that it can be reviewed in a 15-minute block of time at our counter per trade, even if you submitted your plans electronically, you can still, quote unquote, walk those plans through, meaning you can make an appointment with our plan review department and they'll bring up the electronic version of your plan at the review counter and review them with you right there and then. So it doesn't have to be a paper plan to take advantage of the walkthrough availability.
And just to kind of give you guys sort of a pro tip, we are getting like record numbers of plans coming in right now. So submitting electronically and then booking one of those in-person appointments is sort of a good way to get your plan reviewed a little bit quicker. Whereas if you don't book that in person, you're just kind of going to go into the queue and you might be 30 or 60 plans. But if you book that in-person appointment, you're going to get kind of kicked to the head of the line because they'll pull that plan right up on the computer screen at the desk and they'll review it with you. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, and I think it's something that we're starting to see contractors really taking advantage of because it just, again, speeds that process along quite a bit.
Another thing to keep in mind, though, is that the walkthrough is for small scope projects. So if you're submitting a site-specific new home, that would not qualify for a walkthrough because obviously the trusses have to be reviewed. There's quite a bit of information that has to be reviewed regarding heating of the building, heat loss calculations, duct design, that kind of thing. So additions and brand new residences are not available for that type of review. However, if you're doing a deck or a detached garage or you know, a workshop in your backyard, those all qualify for that walkthrough review, whether you submit it electronically or not.
One thing to keep in mind with our appointments that we have for those plan reviews, we are open to those appointments only Monday through Thursday. On Fridays, we're still working, but we're closed to the public. And again, you can book those 15-minute appointments right on our website.
And can we go to the next slide?
So basically what you're looking at here, this is kind of basically we put together a flow chart so kind of everybody understands the electronic process here at RBD. Whenever COVID hit, we had a lot of people turning to the website to do it electronically for the first time. So as you would imagine, we had a little bit of confusion. Again, a lot of contractors and homeowners in the area are somewhat, you might say, old school, and they've only done it the paper way. So when they were forced to do it electronically, we had some confusion. So we put a lot of these handouts and forms and things together to help people out. Personally, I'm a visual learner, so I wanted to kind of put something like this together to help people understand the process. It all starts with an E-plan, and then once you kind of get through the triage portion, you basically make sure that you've got everything that you need for that particular project. Then it basically becomes an actual plan. You get a tracking number that's assigned to it, and then once you actually pay the fees necessary, then it will actually go to a plan review. Our plan reviewers will then look over it, and then it'll go one way or the other. It could go to the left, green arrow to approval, or red arrow to disapproval. You'll see on the right side, it'll actually has the resubmittal, and we have an asterisk next to that. That's because that disapproval and resubmittal process could go on 1 or 2 times. It could go on 5, 6, 7 times, depending on how many times you need to, basically how efficient and how good you are with getting those plans and the corrections made. That could go back and forth several times over. But of course, the goal is you want one and done, right? In and out as quick as possible. You want to go the left route, follow the green arrow to, as soon as you get to plan review, you submit, you get approved. And then once that plan is approved, you go to permitting. And we have this on one of our handouts. We'll talk a little bit more about handouts coming up. Yep. Next slide, please.
All right, so now we have our video from RBD, how to submit an electronic plan. So give me just a second, I'll pull that up here and we will take a look at that. Looks like we're not getting audio. Just a second. All right, I think we are having some audio issues with that video off of YouTube. So how about this, Greg? since I know that's a very helpful video, we will make sure what we're going to do at the end of this is send out a links and resources page. We'll make sure to include the link to how to submit that e-plan review.
Perfect.
So my apologies, everyone. We'll jump back into the presentation and keep rolling here because there's still a lot of good info left to talk about. So let me pull that presentation back up for us. Just a second here. All right. Can everyone see the presentation? Maybe get some verbal confirmation from our presenters here. Do you guys see?
I think you're good, Lauren.
All right, we're on external agencies if you guys want to keep going from here.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. And yeah, hopefully we can get that link out. And if not, you can find that video and several other videos on our YouTube page. And that can be found on our website, kind of in the news and announcements areas. So external agencies, we serve 8 different jurisdictions here in the Pikes Peak region, and El Paso County is obviously one of those agencies. And I'll let Jane kind of finish this one.
Yeah, so we serve City of Colorado Springs, unincorporated El Paso County, Manitou, Monument, Palmer Lake, Green Mountain Falls,
Yeah,
Fountain, and did I say Monument?
I think so.
And the city of Woodland Park.
Yeah.
So if you're submitting plans for approval that require external agencies, if they're in our building, we will route them to those agencies. And obviously that includes El Paso County zoning. But if you have to visit with one of the smaller fire departments or water sanitation departments, you as the submitter or the contractor will have to chase down those approvals yourself. And it's a real mixed bag of whether people are using our software for sign off. Some of them have opted in, some of them have opted out. And so if you are confused and you're not sure where to go for those sign-offs, you can always contact me or someone at the front counter and we'll give you that direction. But we cannot issue a permit at Regional Building Department until we have sign-offs from all of those departments, including zoning, fire, hazmat, engineering, health, utilities. And we are not able to remove them from the review set. They all will have to look at your plans before we can issue the permit.
Yeah, it's really important to know that a lot of times there are other agencies involved. When it comes to the permit, that does come from us. And what we hear a lot of is, well, Regional Building won't give me this permit. Well, that is correct in the sense of we are not giving you that permit, but it might be because the city or the county or city fire is still reviewing it. So it's still under review. So just make sure you know all the agencies involved that you're working with for that particular process. And even though we might be in the same building as them, we have no control over what the other agency's workload is looking like, if they're ahead of us, if they're behind us. All we can control is how things are getting reviewed here at Regional Building.
Can we go to the next one? The other thing that we require at Regional Building is if it's ground up construction, we're always going to need to see some sort of a TAP receipt has been paid or a septic permit if the property is on a septic. We cannot issue a building permit until we know that you have a way to get water and remove wastewater from that property. So you'll need to bring a copy of that to us before we can issue your building permit. And so if you're doing something that requires, if you're building on a property that's on a septic, it's advisable to contact the health department as soon as you can to get that septic permit sort of processing, because I believe their lead time is about 5 weeks at the last I heard from CAP. So that's just something to keep in mind. And also, if the project is in a jurisdiction that requires external approval and or payment of their use tax, you have to, provide us that documentation so that we know that you've paid that before we can issue the permit. As far as ourselves and the county is concerned, we collect all county residential fees. So any fees that are going to be paid to the county for your brand new house or your deck or your detached garage, we will collect all those fees from you, including the county fees at permit time, and then we'll distribute that money to the county zoning department. On commercial projects, that's not the case. However, those fees are paid directly to the county zoning department, and we don't collect those. We just collect the permit fees. And could we go to the next one? Permits in this jurisdiction are good for 180 days, so 6 months, give or take a few days. Each inspection that you schedule will reset the clock for another 180 days. Each permit is also entitled to 1 free extension so long as it's caught before the permit expires. So if you're coming up on a deadline, I know this is an issue right now because there's a supply chain issue. If you know that your project is being held up before it's being held up and you're not going to meet your 180 days to call an inspection, get in touch with us at the front counter and we'll extend that permit for you to keep it open. Otherwise, if you let it expire, you're going to have to pay to reopen it, and also that will impact your ability to renew your license if you're a contractor.
And on our website, if you're a contractor or a homeowner and you have a dashboard, we have kind of a bubble system that alerts you to when certain permits are coming up to expire. We have orange bubbles that are sort of like warnings that action is needed. And then we have red bubbles that say basically things are expired. We're trying to alert people so you can take action before it expires, because as Jane mentioned, if you get to the expiration side of things, it's not only going to be a little bit of a headache to fix that, it's going to cost you money. So always better to ask for that extension, or just better yet, get the work done ahead of the expiration date to avoid having to pay any sort of fines or fees.
And also, one of the main reasons that permits expire is that people assume that they've had their final inspection and they haven't. So if you're ever in any doubt about that, always check with us at Regional Building and we'll let you know the status of that permit. And we can go to the next slide, please.
So I'll take this. We have a number of helpful handouts on our website. As I mentioned earlier, whenever we made the transition due to COVID to largely, well, it was actually the only option doing the electronic version, we had to create a lot of handouts to kind of help people through that electronic submittal process. So we have at least 5 or 6 handouts alone that address helpful tips, how to kind of walk through things just to get you through that electronic plan submittal. One of the best links that I'll encourage you guys all to check out, it's actually called the Helpful Links for Electronic Plan Submittal. I call that kind of like a catch-all. Basically, it's one handout that is just loaded with all of the links that we have to help people through the electronic plan submittal process. So there's at least 15 to 20 handouts, and then 3 or 4 videos. So that's going to be a really good link for you guys to check out. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a YouTube page that also has a number of videos that can be helpful too. If you have a specific project that you're going for, really important that you check out the handouts ahead of time. We actually have it broken down by just about every project you can imagine. We have about 4 deck handouts. We have a basement finish handout. We have a carport handout. We have a pergola handout. if you're doing any of those projects, particularly for the first time, just encourage you to check out that handout first, because it really takes you through the process and explains a lot of the things that we're going to be looking for on the plan review side of things, as well as what we're looking for on the inspection side of things. So if you can check out those handouts first, it'll really help you with that, with the process, because again, it's always better to prevent problems rather than fixing the problems down the road. And the handouts and the videos on our website are really going to help you guys out with that. Anything else to add to that, Jane?
No, I think that's it. There's also a link on our website that says start a project. And if you select a project that you want there, that will automatically give you the links for each of the handouts that you need for that particular type of work.
Yeah, and there's a couple different ways you can find those handouts. As you see in the PowerPoint presentation, you can scroll down to the bottom and you can click on a link that says forms, handouts, and downloads. There's also a big giant button on the main page towards the top. It's off to the far right, and I believe it's just forms and handouts. They're the same thing. And then once you actually click on that, it breaks it down by residential or commercial. If you know your residential project, you're going to go to residential. If you know commercial, click on commercial. If you total it all up, I think we have more than 100 helpful handouts on our website. And again, just encourage you guys to check those out before you guys start the project, not after, whenever you're having a bunch of problems. And I think that's it for us. We can take a few questions now if we want, or if we want to save them to the end. If we don't have anything, I believe I'll send it over to Petra.
Yeah, we'll go. Thank you, Greg and Jane. We'll go back over to Pietra, who is going to take us through the rest of the presentation, and then we'll do questions at the end. So I see we have a couple questions already. Go ahead and keep submitting those in the Q&A chat, and we'll make sure to pull those and answer them once we're done. We're going to go through the rest of the presentation, which will take us through kennels and accessory structures, all that good stuff. So Pietra, go ahead and take it from here.
All right, thanks, Lauren. All right, next slide, please. Oh, never mind. I just realized it's on there already. So on-site wastewater treatment is processed through our public health department. If you want more information on those systems, there's an EPC Engage that was done in April 2021, if you want to see them. Next slide, please. Lauren? Thank you. So what is a site plan? A site plan is a drawing of a lot or parcel that includes the address, parcel number, all existing structures, easements, no build areas, right-of-way, setbacks from the property lines to existing structures, driveway location, proposed structures with dimensions and height showing setbacks. Lot dimensions must match the dimensions from the subdivision plat if applicable. The submission must meet any additional requirements from the written notes from the plat. So on this image, that's a smaller scale image of a site plan. Next slide, please. All right, so copies of the plat can be purchased via the clerk and recorder's office. Unplatted lot dimensions can be found on a survey plat, and legal description of your property can be located on the county assessor's page. The survey plat may be required in some cases. Professional surveyors can be found via an online search or by contacting a surveyor directly. Next slide, please. All right, the checklist shows items again that will need to be shown on the site plan. If the lot is 2.5 acres or less, you will be required to draw the site plan to scale and include a written and graphic scale. Next slide. All right, applicable fees for the county are $147 for the site plan review, $137 for building and erosion control, And then the driveway fees vary, so it's either $104 for an access waiver of private road, $137 for curb and gutter, and $207 for open ditch driveways. Road impact fees are applied at the time of building permits. If the developer has opted to be within a public improvement district, the fees will either be $1,221 or $2,527. If it is not within a public improvement district, the fee will be $3,830. All fees are subject to change, and most fees are applied at time of building permit. Re-review fees must be paid at EPC planning. Next 2 slides, please. All right, driveway applications are processed through our El Paso County Planning and Development Inspection Department. For more information on those applications, please watch our EPC Engage on permits and inspections from March 2021. Next 2 slides. All right, the builders and erosion and sediment quality control permits are processed by our department, but stormwater inspects the properties for compliance. Next slide.
And I'll just jump in real quick because it does feel like we're going through these pretty quick, but just so everyone knows, for these specific permits, we did do a whole EPC Engage in March and went into these in detail with our inspections department. So that's again going to go out with links. If you guys have questions on these specific topics, there's a whole hour's worth of a presentation on our planning website that goes into detail on these, but Petra wanted to at least touch on them in today's presentation. So if you're feeling like we're rushing through them, it's because there's much more content in that March EPC Engage episode. So go ahead and find that. And again, we'll send out the link after the presentation is done.
Awesome, thanks, Lauren. All right. So for sidewalk inspections, these must be completed and approved prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. I believe these are also within the inspections in EPC Engage. So if you want to look at that, feel free to do so. Next slide, please. All right, so an affidavit process is required for accessory living quarters within El Paso County. Detached accessory living quarters or guest houses cannot be rented out and cannot be lived in year-round. Attached accessory living quarters or mother-in-law quarters must be attached to the principal dwelling and can be lived in but not rented out. A detached accessory living quarters for permanent occupancy, or what was previously called an extended family dwelling, must be processed via a planner with a special use process. These are typically lived in by family members. Once the special use is approved, an affidavit process will also be required. Next 2 slides, please. All right, so there's 2 different types of home occupations that are processed within our department. Residential home occupations are typically for the sales or trade of any products manufactured by the resident. We generally process these types for firearm sales. We process the application and the system will produce a certificate that the applicant will need to provide to the ATF. Next slide, please. Rural home occupations are an accessory use on the property which require special use. The submission items are generally a letter of intent, floor plans, and a site plan. In our department, the planners review these. Next 2 slides. Temporary uses are processed by planning reviewers. These are typically model homes or sales offices, fireworks stands, and Christmas tree sales. They also include construction trailers that are usually approved by a planner. All temporary uses can be self-initiated via EDARP by the applicant. Next 2 slides. Minor kennels are processed at the front counter and major kennels are processed by a planner. Minor kennels are 5 to 8 dogs or cats and major kennels are 9+. Next slide. This chart shows the zone districts and the allowances for kennels within the county. Next slide. So again, the minor kennel is from 5 to 8 dogs or cats. There is a minimum setback requirement of 100 feet from all property boundaries. Where overnight boarding occurs, animals shall not be allowed unsupervised outdoor access. A site plan will be required for this review. Next slide, please. So major kennels are 9 or more dogs or cats. A minimum setback of 200 foot is required from all property lines. Where overnight boarding occurs, animals shall not be allowed unsupervised outdoor access. These are processed through our department via special use through a planner. Right, next slide. There we go. Agricultural structure exemptions from building code are self-initiated via EDARP by the applicant and processed by code enforcement. They are solely for agricultural use and are subject to inspection by code enforcement. Allowed uses are shelter for livestock and equipment or materials to care for the livestock, agricultural products, and agricultural implements and machinery. Prohibited uses are commercial use, personal storage or vehicle storage, and other non-agricultural related uses. Next slide, please. Okay, the application requirements are the approved agricultural use and site plan, a minimum of 3 design features or an alternative design that is approved by the PCD director, along with a recorded affidavit, and then will be subject to inspection. Next slide, please. Accessory structures are exempt from building code in the 835 zone district only. The site plan is still processed via a reviewer at the front counter. A site plan and an accessory exemption form are required. Note, if a driveway permit is not on file, one will need to be applied for. Next slide.
And the next slide takes us to our questions. Yes. All right.
Thanks, Lauren.
So, thank you, Pietra. That was a lot of good info and just a lot of info in general. So again, all of our presentations for EPC Engage are recorded and put on our planning website. We will send out, if you guys receive this invitation for today's webinar, you'll also receive kind of an after action email, which will have the recording, the links and resources, anything basically applicable to this presentation, so you guys can go back and review it whenever you want, and share it with anyone who may have missed today's presentation live. So now what we really like about this format is that it gives all of our participants a chance to ask the questions without having to call in or come visit the counter. So now's your opportunity to speak to the people who deal with this every day. If you guys have a question, again, go ahead and submit it in the Q&A section of the chat, which should be found on the top right-hand side of your meeting window. It's got a little question mark with 2 message bubbles. So I've got a couple questions, but not a ton, so don't be shy. Feel free to submit anything that might be on your brain having to pertain to any of the information we went over today, or if you think there's something we missed that applies to permits and over-the-counter applications, go ahead and type it in the chat. We'll get started with the questions that I do have. So first off, we've got a question about how long before I plan to initiate construction should I start the permit process? So Pietra, do you want to take that one, or is that more of an RBD?
I think that's more of an RBD.
All right. Jane or Greg, do you guys have an answer for that guy?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, for sure. How long before I plan to initiate construction should I start the permit process?
Well, if it's commercial, I would definitely give yourself at least 8 weeks, because it has to be reviewed by numerous departments, obviously, like we discussed earlier, and there may be, 1 or 2 resubmittals for corrections. So you definitely want to have some wiggle room. I would definitely give yourself a couple of months for commercial and 6 weeks for residential, to be on the safe side.
I think it also depends a little bit on your experience level too. If you're an experienced architect submitting plans, I would hope that you're going to be a little bit better with the plans, making sure everything is included. Whereas if you're a homeowner or a new contractor that's submitting plans for the first time or doing a project for the first time, you might have to factor in some extra time because there's going to be some rejections and some partials and some things that need to go back and forth in the plan review process.
Great. Thank you. Here's another one for regional building. What are some of the more common mistakes that you guys see with plan submittals?
We mentioned this kind of in our presentation. You know, a lot of times it's not including things. And I think probably just to throw a number out there, I'd say about 80% of the rejections that we come across are because of things that aren't included rather than things that are actually incorrect. That's where those handouts really come in handy. Check those out so you know exactly what is required in that process for that particular project. Some of the other common things we run into is people forgetting to pay. If you haven't paid, it's not going to get into the plan review process. A lot of people are like, I'm waiting on you guys for you guys to review our plan. It's like, well, you haven't paid your fees yet, so it hasn't even made it to our plan reviewers. Another common mistake, seems like a simple one whenever you're going through the submittal process, is people will upload the documents that they often need for that particular project, but they'll forget to hit submit. Just simply uploading the plans or the documents isn't actually submitting it. So upload the project, save it, but then make sure you actually click on submit so it actually makes it over to us at regional. Anything else, Jane?
Well, and I would just sure that you're also making sure that you do that when you do a resubmittal as well. We've seen people go to submit their resubmittal and think they've submitted it, and it's actually just sitting there in the Ethernet, not being looked at. So just make sure that you have included everything that's required of you up front. And if you have any questions about what that looks like, contact us so that we can give you that information before you get started. And that's going to make the process go much more smoothly. The other thing that we have been running into a lot is people fussing at us about external agency sign-offs. We don't have any control over that whatsoever. The departments that have to sign off on a project are populated automatically by our software, and it has to be seen by those departments. And no matter, you know, how much you beg and plead with us, we can't take them off. All those departments have to see your plans.
One other thing to keep in mind too is make sure you're reading the notes that's left by our reviewers. So if your plan comes in and it gets rejected for whatever reason, our plan reviewers will be leaving comments so you can fix that. Make sure you're reading those comments and paying attention to all the details. Sometimes we have people just assume, well, it probably got rejected because of this, and then they end up fixing something that didn't need to be fixed, and they ignore what our reviewers actually pointed out. So really pay attention to those comments that are being left by our reviewers. I think that's those are some of the biggies that we see.
Those are good tips. Pietro, do you have anything on the planning side that you think are kind of common mistakes that might be worth mentioning for people to kind of avoid making the same issues?
Yeah, a lot of times people forget to, put their driveway access on their site plans. Or they haven't looked at the plat to see if there are any no-build areas. And sometimes that can hinder them a little bit, not being able to show those items, or sometimes they don't even know that they're there. So just doing their due diligence to make sure that they look at the plat, I think is a big thing.
Awesome. Craig and Nina, anything you want to add for that?
Yeah, I think Pietro touching on the driveways. One of the things we've also seen is driveways being proposed right where there's stormwater inlets. That gets into the construction drawings, not so much the plat, but the construction drawings. I think we've, just like regional building, have experience where people upload things but don't hit submit, or they think that they've got into the system, but they have not paid the fee yet. So you want to make sure that you accomplish both those. That'll then send it into our folks for review. So it's pretty similar to regional building. Uploading doesn't do it. Only when you make that payment and hit that submit button does it actually trigger a review. So, and Pietro brought up the plats. Our front counter is there to help. If you don't have access to the plats, you can't find it, or maybe you don't even know what a final plat is. We're happy to provide that information. And obviously, we'd much rather provide that up front than you go through the effort of designing something only to find out that maybe it's where you're proposing it's in a no-build area like Pietro referenced. Let's have that conversation up front. If there's the potential for that, certainly reach out and we can provide that information, and hopefully that saves you some time and money getting through the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig. And yeah, so click all the right buttons and make sure you're paying. And it sounds like you'll avoid a lot of the common issues. And I know, because I'm not as in-depth as these guys, that this is a lot of information to digest, especially if you're doing your first project or just starting out kind of in this, either in the area working with these agencies or in the industry. So we have some other learning opportunities for you guys, because it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Regional Building offers a Contractor 101 course, which you can find information on their website. Greg, do you want to just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a class that we've been offering for a couple years now, and it's really been great, I think, for, it's called Contractor 101, and it's geared towards brand new contractors to the area, but it's also a great class for homeowners that are kind of DIY, do-it-yourself homeowners, because if you're doing it yourself as a homeowner, you're essentially the contractor. You still have to pull permits and work with us. So this really takes everybody, it's a little bit of what we went through today, but a little bit more heavy on the permitting, licensing, and inspection side of things. We also do a lot of navigating on our website. Our website is really great if you kind of know what you're doing. So we kind of take people through the process of, helpful things, how to actually submit online, how to find those handouts and whatnot. So it's a really great class. It's offered on the first Thursday of each month, except we're going to take the month of August off. Right now, we have been doing them virtually, which has been good and bad. At this point, I'm sure everybody has been on 8 gajillion Zoom calls, Teams meetings just like this one. They're good because they allow you to get on virtually, and you can be literally anywhere to hop on, but it does make things a little bit more, impersonal. Not quite as good. So I think we're going to try to get back to some in-person classes starting in September. This class is totally free, and you can sign up for it on our website, PPRBD.org/event/contractor. And I believe that's already up and ready to be, you can go ahead and sign up for our next class, which will be in September. We also offer a couple of other classes for realtors. We have basically a residential realtor class, and then we also have a commercial broker class. And the whole idea there is we get a lot of calls, just like the county does, from realtors that are saying, hey, I'm trying to close on a house, and I just figured out that the basement was finished without a permit, or there's a deck that was done without a permit. I need to get this fixed like tomorrow. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that quickly as much as we would like it to. So we try to educate the realtors to that process, so that they can then pass on that information to their clients. So those are a couple of the classes that we offer. If this is of interest to you guys, we would love to have you join us.
Awesome. Thank you. And then, Jane, did you have something else? No.
No, I just wanted to say that you guys, any of the people that are attending the webinar today, are welcome to contact us at any time if they want more information about our side of things. And the best way to do that is through our website. There's a blue banner at the top, and there's a little link that says contact with an envelope next to it. If you've got a question for me or somebody at the front counter, you're going to select building permits in that drop-down menu, and those messages come directly to us, and we try to answer them within the day.
And the reason that that's the best way to get in touch with us is just in case somebody's off. So if you had Jane's email address, you're certainly welcome to email her. But if Jane were to happen to be on vacation or something, going through this contact us button and actually just put it in the building permit. So if you have a question, it'll go to all of our permit text. So that way, if one of our employees is on vacation or sick or something like that, it doesn't just go into the cloud and sit there until they get better and get back. It'll just go to the next person. So that's why we encourage everybody to use that method to get in touch with us. And please don't hesitate to contact us. We're happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And that's kind of a good segue also into our next EPC Engage events, which are going to be coming up. As Craig mentioned in the beginning, we've got one in September, which is going to be the do's and don'ts of concrete work. And we're doing these every other month on the last Wednesday. So we've got one in September, we'll skip October, and then we'll have one in November, which will also focus on realtors' guide to zoning and planning. So let folks know if you have people you think would be interested in those topics, or if you would like to join us again, please do so. We're doing these for the benefit of, the industry and our partners. And so also on that note, if you guys have additional topics that you would like us to explore, please reach out and we'll be happy to add those into our rotation. That's all we have today, though. I will be sending out a list of links and resources that'll pertain to all the content that we went over today, as well as a recording of today's presentation, whether you guys want to keep that to reference later, or if you want to share it with some colleagues of yours who may have missed today. That should go out either end of this week or early next week. But otherwise, we really appreciate you joining us. We appreciate Regional Building for participating with us today, and thanks to Pietra and the planning staff for all your support as well. And we'll see you guys in September for our next EPC Engage.
Can you